Hello, this is What's All About with another watch review, and in this review we're looking at two models from the Spinnaker Cahill range. That is the men's and the mid-size. So there's a few little differences. Obviously they're different in price as well, but we'll go through them and discuss which one's the best and if they are indeed decent watches for the money. So the key thing to be aware of is that the men's is 43mm in diameter and the mid-size is 38mm in diameter. So before we go into that, there's a code that you can use, you guys, WIAA30, what's all about 30, that will give you 30% off the RRP and also free shipping. So that's good to keep in mind. So let's talk about the prices. So the men's is an RRP of $410 or £315 roundabout, but with the code it's down to $287 or £220. The mid-size RRP is already reasonable at $245 or £185, but it goes down to $171.50 or around about £130. So that makes it even more reasonable. So just keep that in mind. So size-wise, the men's comes in at 43mm in diameter by 16mm height, and then a lug to lug length of 50mm. So I've got about 7.25 inch wrist. Fits me reasonably well, but we'll go and discuss it a bit further detail. Everything's black, black strap, black DLC coated case as well. So it does tend to provide a lot of wrist presence. You know, you can't really avoid it. So it does seem a little bit bigger than the 43mm diameter suggests. Moving on to the mid-size, we have a diameter of 38mm, which is a bit easier to handle, a height of 14mm, and a lug-to-lug length of 46.5mm. So my personal preference is probably the mid-size. Some people might think 38mm is a little bit too small, but I think it suits really well. You know, it's not small enough to look a bit puny. You know, that's more 36mm and down, but it holds its own and it looks pretty good on the wrist as well. Weight wise, there's obviously a weight difference because of the size. So the men's comes in 106 grams, whereas the mid-size clocks up 76 grams. So you know, there's a good 30 grams difference, which is quite a surprise actually. But they both feel good on the wrist. You know, they're not too light, they're not too heavy. You know, they feel surprisingly decent quality when you're wearing them. Water resistance rating, the men's has a higher water resistance rating of 200 meters or 20 atmosphere, whereas the mid-size has 100 meters or 10 atmospheres. So I probably wouldn't take the mid-size. You could probably go gentle swimming with it, but that's about as far as it will go. I probably wouldn't personally anyway because of the strap. Whereas the men's, it has a specific water resistant strap on it, if you can see the printing there. And obviously the 200 meter water resistance rating means you can do a lot more with it. So you can do a lot more swimming. You can go a little bit further underwater with it. Movement wise, it's interesting that they've chosen a different movement in each watch. You would have thought because they're part of the same family, they'd be the same movement, but no. So the men's, if you can see, it has a Miyota 8215 in it, which you know, is a watch we've seen a lot of, but not quite as much as the movement in the mid-size, but we'll come on to that. So this hasn't really been regulated very well. It's coming in with my Lepsy watch scope at plus 34.7 seconds a day out. So that is, you know, you would have, I personally would have wanted it to be a little bit more regulated before it came through. It has this Spinnaker. It's basically just a blue sticker on the rotor, but at least they've made the effort to do something unique with the stock rotor. Moving on to the mid-size movement. So this is the Seiko NH35, which we do see a lot, and immediately you can tell the difference actually. First of all, the accuracy is coming in at plus 2.9 seconds a day, which is pretty outrageous, really. So straight up, you can tell that it's a better regulated movement. Looking at it as well on the bridges and stuff, you can see that it's better finished. And then the custom rotor has this sort of wave pattern on it. I think it's just a sticker as well as the 8215, but it just looks a little bit nicer. Got a better finish to it as well. So I definitely do prefer the Seiko in the mid-size. So strap width 22mm on the men's and 20mm on the mid-size. That's mainly just to compensate to the difference in case size, but they both work very well, and they look in correct ratio to the case itself. They both come with a 2-year warranty as well, so that's a good thing. Okay, so that's the specs all talked about. Let's just think about these different aspects in closer detail. So starting off with the dial, as you can see, very similar in design. When you start dissecting it a little bit more, you can notice a few little changes, but all in all, it's a very similar retro 60s kind of theme behind it. Obviously, the big bold hour markers are a key part of it. They're the same size on both watches. It's just that on the mid-size they're slightly closer together. They're a little bit more packed on the dial. And then also we've omitted 3 on the mid-size to make way completely for the date window. Now I personally prefer the layout on here. I think on the men's, the date window it's looking a little bit small, but it's also looking a little bit out of place. It's shoved in into the dial too much, whereas this is just at the right spot on the mid-size, exactly where the 3 hour marker should be. So that's preferable for me. The logos are different sizes, so they are different. So smaller on the mid-size, larger on the men's, as you can see. And then the hands are slightly different as well. The men's has a classic Mercedes pair, whereas the mid-size is a little bit more, if I can, it's a bit bright in here. So we have the Mercedes logo completely omitted from the disc, but also a little bit more of a modern feel to the hands as well, which I personally prefer. Both dials have a sort of mottled kind of texture to them, which is quite a divider of opinion. It's quite hard to see easily, but I'll get the macro lens on in a bit. I personally think this is quite interesting. You can't see it as much on the black dial of the men's, whereas on the green dial you can see it, and it also goes with this sort of texturized strap quite nicely as well. Moving on to the case then. So the bezel, we have a glass insert on the men's, whereas a standard aluminium insert on the mid-size. The movement is much nicer and easier on the men's, but there is a little bit of wobble. If you just tap this bit here, you can feel a small amount of wobble, which is a shame. On the mid-size, however, the movement is really terrible. It's really hard to rotate. As you can see, I'm really having to give it a lot of pressure there to get it moving. So definitely better mechanism for the bezel on the men's. Both have good grip though, so hopefully this mid-size stiff bezel is just a one-off, and that all the other bezels are nice. The case itself, the key difference is that the men's has the Spinnaker logo engraved on the side, whereas the mid-size doesn't. And we have more or less the same crown as well, just ever so slightly different sizes, but they have the logo engraved from the end, decent grip, and then sort of like a channel down the centre as well, keeping things interesting. So good nice crown, decent thick thread on that as well, because it's a screw-in crown, so it feels really good. when you're screwing in and unscrewing the watch with the crown. Moving on to the case back then, both again very similar. Both are exhibition case backs showing off the movement well, and pretty much same in design, just a difference in size. So we have the exhibition window and then watch specifics surrounding that with our little notches to unscrew the case back. The cases in themselves are actually really well machined. I have noticed that these Spinnakers are probably the best Spinnakers they've produced yet. I've reviewed a couple already, Tavalara and the Spence, whereas these two, it's good to see Spinnaker going in the right direction because the quality of these are much better. Moving on to the straps then, finally, so the water resistant strap here is very nice and soft, very thick, supple already, which is a good thing, and has some nice little orange stitched accents to it. The buckle is a little bit more aggressive and industrial kind of feeling with the DLC coating first of all, but also these sort of curved wings and a flat top, whereas on the mid-side it's more of a standard tang buckle. Both have the Spinnaker logo engraved on the top nice and neatly and deeply. So the strap on the mid-size has this interesting sort of like texturized top. It matches the dial quite well, and again on the mid-size the quality of the leather is very nice, very supple, nice and thick, and when you feel it you just get the feeling of decent quality. Again, we have a few little bits of stitched accents there to keep things interesting. Okay, so let's get the macro lens on, have a look at these watches in closer detail. Let's start with the men's. So you can see there the mottled backdrop to the dial. There's our date window and a couple of hour markers. And our logo there. Moving on to our hands. So the dial in itself is actually well manufactured on both watches. It's just the usual thing that I found with Spinnaker is the logo is too thin. It looks a little bit cheap because it's so flat. Obviously it's given off a metallic impression, but I think it should be a little bit deeper really. Moving on to the bezel, you can see this glass insert is nice and shiny, provides a reflection as well. And moving on to the grip on the side, and now the case. It says Spinnaker engraved on the side. So we've got a nice little sharp edging to this accented corner of the lugs, which is a nice touch. And then moving on to our crown, have the logo engraved on the end and nice channel around the middle, much like an Oreo biscuit with decent grip. Moving on to the case back, so we have these watch specifics surrounding the outside, and then we have our movement itself, the Miyota 8215. So there it is ticking away. And here's our custom rotor. It's pretty much just a sticker on top of the stock rotor. So moving on to the strap, here's the top. You can see it's a very matte, soft, flat kind of finish to it, which I think works well with the theme of the watch. Our accented straps, stitching, sorry. Moving on to the top, is the buckle here, Spinnaker logo engraved on the top bar. Okay, moving on to the mid-size. So again, you can see the green textured base here. If I can get a decent focus on it, there we go. And again, the logo there, a little bit on the thin side. Our markers I've found to be thick enough though, and they are brushed in appearance with the loom sticker, and they match the hands as well, which have this brushed feel to them. Looking at the date window here, you can see in a much nicer position, a bit more space around it, feels a bit freer. So here's our bezel insert, which is just painted. Moving on to our grip on the bezel, not quite as good grip, but if it had a nice smooth action, then it would suffice. Here's the plain side of the case on the mid-size. Here's how it looks. Then moving over this way, have a look at our crown. So again, logo engraved on the end, our Oreo type crown, decent grip. Moving on to the case back, again the same thing here, where we have our watch specifics around the outside, and then our movement itself, the Seiko NH35A. So it is nice, finished in a nicer way than the Miyota, that's for sure. And then we have this wave kind of pattern stuck onto the stock rotor. Okay, the strap then, got this textured top, which is very soft, and these stitched accents as well. The underside nice and soft as well. And then our tang buckle has the Spinnaker logo engraved on the top, and it's brushed as well. Okay, so I am happy to say that Spinnaker have really picked things up for the Cahill range. They are much better quality watches than I've ever seen before for Spinnaker. Which one's my favourite? Well, hands down the mid-size. I think it's an absolutely great deal. First of all, the price. Not only is the RRP good at $245, £185, but when you use the Watch All About code WIAA30, it drops down to $171 or £130, which is incredible, really. I'd go even as far as saying it's a great watch for that money. The movement is much better. The Seiko NH35 rocking in at 2.9 seconds a day, which is really, really good. I also think it's a slightly nicer design as well. The build quality is equal on both of them. They're both as well built as each other. I just feel the slightly smaller case means that the dial has been allowed to spread out a bit better, and it looks a little bit nicer as well. For instance, around the date wheel at 3, it's a little bit more spread out, easier to read as well. So yeah, and I prefer the sticker on the movement as well. It's not to say the men's isn't a good watch, it's just that I feel the design doesn't quite work as well. The Mercedes hands, I think it would have been nicer if both watches had the hands from the mid-size. And then we have this little bit of wiggle on the bezel as well, which is a shame. But saying that, they're still both good watches, and if you really, really like the men's, then you won't be getting a bad watch. In fact, with the code, $287 or £220 is still good. It's just that I think there are better alternatives for that price range. Okay, so I do really like them, however, and they have really impressed me, so well done to Spinnaker for doing that. So this has been the Spinnaker Cahill men's and mid-size, and that's what it's all about.